in case y'all are not able to visually understand like what was going on inside this video, more of like in the comment section. Background information for those people who are not that familiar with these bus services. So you have to keep in mind that you are essentially talking to a group of radical bus enthusiasts whom just cannot take any form of criticism, especially if it goes against their guiding principles as to how they design bus routes, not even how bus enthusiasts or the actual bus planners design bus routes. So essentially, what they really aim to achieve is that usually they would have this suffix, and then the starting point and end point, sometimes it would change, but in this case, it doesn't change. And then essentially, it's basically forcing the parent service to become a limited stop service. This is not saying we will run 30 and 30R or whatever at the same time. No, this is not this. These people, again, like I've explained, they want to force parent all stop services to become limited stop services. So essentially, if I present it in another way, currently service 30, it calls all stops. And their idea is basically to force service 30R to skip all the intermediate stops and only call the major stops like this. Essentially duplicating existing MRT lines or even future MRT lines like Cross Island Line in some other cases. But in this case, it would be, yeah, this. So the whole hub spoke from a bus service to the MRT and then to another bus service like first mile, last mile. They're essentially doing the exact same thing, except that they're doing it with buses instead. Which means that these limited stop bus services would basically end up getting rationalized because it completely duplicates these MRT lines. Sometimes they would make the claim that, oh, when these MRT lines go kapoof, you would then make use of these limited stop bus services instead of having to rely on bridging bus services. But then you have to ask yourselves, how often do train disruptions even happen? And be honest, it's not every day, right? So whenever there isn't a train disruption, these limited stop bus services would end up carrying air, basically. So most of the time, they are just essentially flushing money down the toilet by running such bus lines in the first place. It also goes back to the fact that they are unable to brainwash actual bus enthusiasts or bus planners in LTA, so they resort to Reddit and whatever site that they could get their hands on and start brainwashing the masses, meaning ordinary folks, non bus enthusiasts, to agree with their ideas. Then you might be asking, okay, do they give any compensation for their local sectors like the intermediate stops? Sometimes they give, sometimes they don't give, and even when they give, it's always really half-hearted. And what I mean by that is these radical bus enthusiasts could make the claim that, oh, it in some sectors we would actually make them call all stops, call all local stops, but it's just a distraction from the real problem. The fact is that they still chose to make existing all stop bus services skip stops. That alone is a problem. So service 30, it used to call all stops. Now these people made it skip stops, right? So your local sector compensation would be in the form of something like this. Like, these are not their real plans, but I'm just showing you this as an example of like how bad their real plans could get. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm just using this to illustrate. I have seen their plans before, and let's just say it's quite bad. It's a lot worse than this that I'm about to show you. So, usually, when this happens, they would take a bus service that is completely unrelated to Service 30 in any way, and they would make this the local counterpart. So, what they would do is that this thing is like local all stops, right? So, just to illustrate, it's the equivalent of saying, okay, 176, it would parallel Service 30, like all the way till West Coast Road, no, Pasir Panjang Road, right? And then they would even do something stupid as to like, oh, Service 30 needs to be Sonic the Hedgehog, so 176 will now take over the entire Pasir Panjang Road to West Coast Road, effectively killing off the purpose of 176 in the first place. And then they would be like, oh, we don't want to run 176 to Bukit Panjang. We will just run 176 from Boon Lay to Bukit Merah because in the past there is this bus service called 184, which is basically just like what we intend to do with 176. I mean, said 184 used to be from Jurong to like Jurong Interchange, Jurong Port Road to Bukit Merah, right? There was actually such a service. So they would be like, no, it used to exist. We're just bringing it back. And then they would be like, oh, 176 would call all local stops from Bukit Merah to Boon Lay. And we wouldn't give Bukit Panjang any compensation. I have seen these people in some way or another attempting to use trunk services like these to eat up all the Clementi feeder services and call it best network integration, even though it pretty much destroys the purpose of both the trunk services and the feeder services in the first place. But let's not talk about these, because I've already talked about why 184 has to loop at Clementi in this exact fashion and why 173 should not be used to eat up more feeder services now that it's bidirectional, by the way. But one example of to show how desperate they are sometimes, how do you put it? So basically, they would actually go to, they would actually, like these are the lengths that these people would actually go through just to achieve their own motives and not like to actually benefit the commuters in the first place. So they would be like, oh, let's integrate 284, 282, and 285 at one go. So they would actually do something like this. And that's not it. These people often complain that feeder services do not offer enough connectivity to the outside world. But they are feeder services for a reason. There is a distinction between trunks and feeder services. Trunks bring you to the outside world. Feeders are only meant to be confined within the town for obvious reasons. They are designed for people who are only commuting within the town or like just a big area in general. Machi no sakai o koete nai rosen. I don't even know how to say that in English. I'm sorry. Like feeders, some feeders are high frequency, some feeders are not really high frequency, like in the case of 272 and 273, because the population density in Teluk Blangah isn't even that high in the first place, so it doesn't make sense to run it at frequencies higher than like 12 minutes or so. But because of this group of people's vehement hatred towards feeder services in general, they would force like they would first make the feeders eat at one another, and then they would make said resultant feeder services get absorbed into trunk routes. So one example of what they would do with this concoction that I just showed you, it'll be like, okay, 176 no longer serves like Bukit Panjang, right? And Bukit Batok, right? So they would be like, oh, I'm smart, big brain. We would have like this new bus service. Oh, we would renumber it, and then we would be like, okay, I forgot one part. Clementi Avenue 4. And then they would be like, oh, this new service basically becomes 176 replacement, like from Clementi to like Jurong East to Bukit Batok West, and then to Bukit Batok East, and then to Bukit Panjang. And if you were not happy with their proposals, they would be like, okay, why not we just make it so that 285 goes to Boon Lay, the new 285, and we'll make it that 176 goes to Jurong East, Bukit Batok, and Bukit Panjang instead. And then they would be like, 176 does not deserve to call West Coast Highway because that is meant for our Sonic the Hedgehog bus service in the form of 30R. And then they would be like, we're gonna make 176 go inside West Coast Road and Pasir Panjang Road instead because it's meant to be a local connection. So basically, that group of radical bus enthusiasts are very, very prone to this kind of haphazard planning. People who don't understand the purposes of 30, 176, 282, 284, and 285 in the first place. And the fact that these are feeders and the reason why they have to be split instead of like combining them all into one service. In essence, like doing too much with one service. See, this is the problem with that group in general. They try to do too much with just one service. So in essence, nobody wins. Connectivity would just end up being cut off with this kind of like haphazard replacement of fragments and stuff like that. But then those people would just brand it as a rearrangement. If you're not happy, then just transfer to the other bus services. Then you might be thinking, what about the other fragment of uh, service 30, the local fragment? Okay, I should say, now that 30 is limited stop, what happens to the other local fragment of service 30? Then they would be like, okay, now that because there's Circle Line 6, right, now service 10 would start from Harbourfront instead of like Kent Ridge, and then they would be like, oh, the local fragment would now be service 10 instead. This one is the local fragment that doesn't even go to Badok. This is the local fragment. And then their excuse would be that, oh, between Dakota and Badok, our service 30 would be all stopped. So there is no need for another local fragment between this sector. Yeah. In some cases, one local fragment and the other local fragment, they would share a same bus stop so that passengers can still transfer. But in most cases, some of these local fragments don't even intercept each other at all. Because essentially what they're trying to do with their quote unquote piece by piece replacement of sectors, haphazard replacement, which actually ends up displacing more commuters instead of actually helping them. So essentially, this is not just, you know, making an existing local all stop service skip stops and then replacing them with one fragment and then another fragment of this service 30. It's not even like a direct replacement of it. Whereas A would be one fragment and B would be one fragment. No. What actually ends up happening in, I think, all cases is that fragment A would be 176 or maybe 285. Maybe you could call this like A1 and A2 or whatever. You see, I know it sounds funny like A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, but this is really what they plan to do sometimes. Their whole haphazard like fragment piecing together different fragments to create a new resultant bus service, that kind of thing. And then, like in this case, service 10 would become fragment B. I'm just going to get straight to the point. The problem with this kind of haphazard bus planning is that all of these individual fragments, whether it's just A or B, or A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, and B1, B2, B3, B4, B5, the problem with this is that you end up defeating the purpose of every single bus service that is involved in the entire rationalization or bus network integration exercise. Every single bus service that would be involved would end up losing their purposes. Losing the purpose of why they are even designed in the first place or why they have even changed over time in the first place. You can change things, but you have to change it properly. And this is one way how you shouldn't do it. Like you shouldn't go about doing it. So essentially all the A1, A2, A3, B1, B2, B3, B4, B5, it's basically what I'm trying to say, haphazard rearrangement of the individual fragments that make up the original all-stop local bus service that they have now converted into a limited stop bus service. You know, this diagram kind of looks like Musashino line, right? But I just want to make the point that whether your fragments actually end up meeting each other or not, like regardless of whether your fragments, like your A1, A2, A3, B1, B2, B3, B4, B5, or even just A and B, whether they meet or don't meet, it doesn't change the fact that this kind of bus route planning and reorganization should never ever ever be considered. I kind of forgot about like the first bus timings because I have always been emphasizing on the last bus timings, right? Because these enthusiasts, they're not running set all limited all stop services only at certain times of the day. No, they are running it full day. Okay, let's assume that they actually meet up. It is still bad because let's say this fragment actually originates from another bus terminal. You would see this eventually becomes a problem because your last bus timings, I would just say this really simply, have to connect with one another. I want you guys to take a look at the last bus timings of service 30. Okay, where is it? Over here. Departing Boonlay at 12:20 a.m. This essentially means that this bus service has to depart Boonlay, like the timings cannot be changed, right? 12:20 a.m. or even later, because you know why? Cause I mean, now that you made the parent service 30 into skip stops and now that it's a limited stop express service, the bus route is going to be quote unquote faster, right? So you would actually need to extend the last bus timings all the way till, I would say, let's just say 1 a.m. for simplicity's sake. Your last bus of fragment A has to depart in such a way that you would be able to meet up with service 30. And service 30 has to depart such that it meets up with the last 176 in this case. Assuming that 176 indeed is one fragment of the local fragment of this service. Not only that, 176 and 30R, both of them, they need to be able to intercept fragment B, which in this case is service 10. So departing Boonlay at 1 a.m., right? I would just assume that you would be able to reach Harbourfront because it skip stops, right? At around 1:30 a.m. So at 1:30 a.m., it would meet up at this common stop. Okay, you know what? I should probably draw it so that it's like this instead. It wasn't accurate just now. So this essentially means that at 1:30 a.m., your last bus of this bus service and this bus service, one skip stop, one local, they have to meet up. Which means that if service 10 in this case used to depart its terminal at, let's say, 11:30 p.m. would be the last bus, right? No. Now you have to wait for both 176 and this bus service. If 1:30 a.m. is the latest timing in which all two or three or four or five of these buses meet, like basically all the fragments and the skip stop bus service, all of them meet up at 1:30 a.m. Service 10, let's just assume that it starts at Bukit Merah. Your last bus from Bukit Merah now needs to be extended from, let's say, 11:30 p.m. all the way to 1:20 a.m. So 1:20 a.m. it'll take around 10 minutes. I know it's an exaggeration, but it would probably take around 10 minutes for it to reach, like, let's say, this common stop, which is near Harbourfront, I would say. So it's not just as what those radical bus enthusiasts claim, we'll just extend one or two last buses. No, this is not the case. Do you see how much you have to extend the last bus of one of the fragments just so that every single one of these fragments could meet up with fragment B, service 10? And the thing is, this is assuming that fragment A and fragment B even meet up in the first place, where this would be the common point, right? I drew the diagram like this for a reason. I mean, just now. What if the fragments don't even meet up with each other, in which this happens more often than you think when it comes to the radical bus enthusiasts bus network integration plans. This actually happens more often than this. Because keep in mind, these fragments are not completely new bus services that are created from scratch. These new fragments, again, to make matters worse, it's actually from existing bus services. They intentionally amend it in such a way that to link up with whatever they just created, essentially making these individual fragments lose their original purposes in the first place. That alone is already bad. So the scary part about this is that this is actually the scenario for like most cases when it comes to like their bus network integration plans. Over here you have one common point whereby one fragment, one skip stop service, and the other fragment meet up together. What if they don't actually meet up together? So if this one is a common point, there's only one of it. Right now, you're gonna have like two common points. This would further complicate the last bus timetables, and stuff like that. And I haven't even gotten into the first bus timings, where people are actually rushing to work. Now that you've cut off connectivity from them, yeah, I don't even have to elaborate. From one common point to two common points, meaning that your timetables would be harder to plan, it would be more complicated because you would have to like line up every single thing together. And you used to be able to take service 30 from Boon Lay to like Badok after the last bus of after the last eastbound train of Singapore's East West Line has departed, right? You when the last train has departed, sometimes you're able to rely on these last buses to get to where you need to go, especially if you live along service 30's route in this case. You used to have a one direct ride. I don't know what I'm saying, but you used to be able to ride service 30 direct. Now that these people force service 30 to skip stops, everybody that is located within the intermediate stops, whether it's for boarding or alighting, they will be affected by it because now these enthusiasts made the bus service skip stops. So when you make the bus service skip stops and when you have so many fragments to deal with, and when the fragments don't even meet up together, it basically leads to like an overcomplication of things. And not just that, from zero transfers at night, people would be forced to make 1 plus 1 equals 2 transfers. Sometimes it's just one transfer, but in the worst case scenario, when your fragments don't even link up to each other, case in point whereby they're coming from an intermediate stop that's only served by one fragment, and their destination is located at another intermediate stop that's at the other fragment, and the fact that the skip stop bus service doesn't even touch any of these intermediate stops in the first place, like it just skips them. Can you see how this is basically like MRT rationalization but with buses instead? And by the way, if you've noticed that there are a lot of like awkward pauses in the video or anything like that, that's because this video is completely unscripted. My videos usually are completely unscripted. Sometimes I script it a little bit, but that would be rare. Most of the time my videos are unscripted. If I can come up with all of these unscripted, it really speaks volumes about like the Singapore bus community in general, especially those who don't know how to plan bus routes in the first place. They claim to save resources, but do you realize how resource intensive this would be? You got so many fragments like A1, A2, A3, B1, B2, B3, B4, B5 that you've rearranged in a haphazard manner, and you've made all the fragments lose their original purposes. You would have to run so many fragments and so many skip stop bus services. You're not even cutting down resources in the first place. You're just transferring the problem elsewhere. You cut off connections, right? So now people would be forced to do a lot more hub spoke using just the buses alone. I'm not even talking about trains, railways, or anything. I'm just talking about within buses alone. You would need to run so much more buses on the fragments and the skip stop bus service because you funneled everybody into this whole local bus, skip stop bus, local bus commute system. You get it? Like the problem has been transferred from the existing bus network to this new haphazard and confusing bus network. Another case is whereby they forced 851 to become a skip stop bus service, and they made it so that 852 now becomes the local variant of said, local variant up to a certain point of said skip stop bus service. So basically, those people, instead of making 852 go to McRitchie Reservoir, they actually made it go Thompson Road, PIE, CJC, Whitley Road, Bukit Timah Road. Yeah. Basically destroying the original purpose of 852. And I don't know what they're doing with their new 852. and crayoning more fragments from scratch just to replace off the local sectors, the intermediate sectors that they've deleted from the original bus service now that they've made that bus service skip stops. Can you see how this is all more resource intensive? Even if they claim that, like, oh, we're going to run this at 20-minute frequencies, the fact is that you've just created a new bus service and you've created a lot more problems on the logistics side that both the PTOs and LTA now have to handle. Despite claiming to be bus enthusiasts, these people honestly have a very weak foundation of like bus route planning in general. You see, like 292 is designed to be the windy bus service and allows people to hub spoke from other bus services like the trunk bus services along New Upper Changi Road and Bedok South Road. This is what, and then there's also another common stop outside Siglap Community Center. This is 229. And then there's also service 38. These are the actual routes, which was formed as a merger of 220 and 290. But that's not really important in this context. These two bus services, they serve completely different purposes. Like 38 is meant to be straight, 229 is meant to wind. And the most important thing is that 229 is a feeder bus service. So it's meant to only stay within Bedok. It's not meant to travel outside of Bedok. This means that it is far easier to control the frequency of 229 as opposed to when you guys haphazardly merged it in this manner and just called this resultant service the new 38. You just basically destroyed the purpose of both bus services at the same time. Like these people didn't even care about like the hub spoke connectivity at this bus stop. And not just that, we've deleted the red and blue lines, right? Now there's no bus service from New Upper Changi Road to Bedok South Road. Now there are no buses that run straight from Bedok South Road, this side of Bedok South Road, to this side of Bedok South Road. There is no more bus service like this because of the way these people haphazardly crayoned them. And even if these people actually kept this side of Bedok South Road, it still wouldn't make sense because 38 is designed in such a way that people from Bedok, like the main hub, could access Bedok South Road quickly. Now you just force all the existing Service 38 passengers to throw one round. And keep in mind, their new concoction, their new Service 38 per se, they would actually force it down to loop like this, not to loop, but like to wrap around itself. I don't know what you call it, but to make one big detour because they deleted 229. And basically this means that you're not able to access Bedok South Road from Tanah Merah quickly. And then these people would claim that, no, I already gave you guys service 12 and 47. Why not you guys rely on service 12 and 47? Again, you're transferring the problem from service 38 to these two services, which means these two services as a result would be more crowded because you made it such that 38 is no longer direct. You're basically forcing them to take 12 or 47 instead. And keep in mind, in this very context, 47 goes to Changi Business Park, 12 goes to Simei Road, but only 38 currently goes to Simei Street 4, 3, and 1. So this means that if you're boarding from Bedok South Road and then your destination is either located along Simei Street 4, Simei Street 3, or Simei Street 1, okay, the rest is being served by 12, but this side there's only 38. So this means that you want to take 38 from Bedok South Road to these areas. But now, because these bus enthusiasts, they deleted service 229, so now your 38 would be forced to waste time doing this detour, which is completely unfair to these people. Essentially, this means anybody that's taking 38 past this area, like the original bus service, it's meant to do this, right? Now you make them detour one round. So if your destination is Simei Street 1, Simei Street 3, Simei Street 4, or Tampines Avenue 7, in between Tampines Avenue 4 and 2, which is not served by Service 12, by the way. If your destination happens to be at Simei Street 4, 3, 1, or Tampines Avenue 7, these quote-unquote bus enthusiasts have done you a disfavor by making your journey a lot longer because of this unnecessary detour that they've created by eating up service 229. Not only that, if at any point in time this new service 38 gets affected by congestion, for instance, if any part along this new service 38's route between like this, 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 as long as there is a delay, say along this junction, along this junction, along this junction, or even these junctions, like this junction or this junction, or even this junction, as long as there's congestion in these areas that I have circled, pretty much everybody that used to take 229, whom are forced to now take the new service 38 that the enthusiasts have created, they would be affected by the congestion that I've circled in the previous two slides. So anywhere along the route, like the parts that I have circled, when this new service 38 gets trapped by congestion, the unreliability of the service, basically irregular frequency, bus bunching, and everything, it'll affect service 229's passengers that are now forced to take 38. This is the reason why 229 is a feeder service. It's meant to be confined within the boundaries of Bedok and not go out of Bedok. So basically, this is why 229 has to be a feeder service that only operates within Bedok and not outside of Bedok. Anything outside of Bedok, 38 would take on this role. So this is a case of like the radical bus enthusiasts not even understanding the differences between a trunk service and a feeder service and are forcing them to integrate at the expense of everybody that actually relies on these routes. And it doesn't help that these people, they often have delusions about, oh, more bus lanes equals less congestion. These enthusiasts are also capable of way more ridiculous things. So this bus service, it's not technically a city direct service, but it functions like a city direct service with only morning peak trips and evening peak trips, basically, in case you didn't know. So what these people are essentially doing is they have converted this bus service into a full day service, even though there's already Thompson East Coast Line, hello. But that's just one thing. If you want to make like full day CDS, I'm not against that. But what I am against, and I'm pretty sure that the actual bus planners would be against, is using these bus services that are now converted to trunk services, like the radical bus enthusiasts would convert this to a full day trunk service, and use it to eat up existing feeder bus services and completely defeating the purpose of said feeder services in the first place. So what these people do is that, let's say 951E, I'm going to use black, so they're going to do this. And then they're probably going to send the bus service inside the areas that are served by the feeder services. And they would take this opportunity to eat up 904. So this is just an example of what they would do. And then they're gonna be like, oh, what if you don't want to go to the city? Is there any compensation for me like 951M, 951A? No, they really did a 951A, which is supposed to serve between this area and I don't know this area, like from this area to this area or something along those lines. This is not how bus planning works. And then they would be like, oh, in compensation for the loss of 904, we would be sending a bus service to Woodlands Avenue 7 to go inside Woodland Street 83 and then come out again, touch Admiralty MRT. Okay, I apologize, the color contrast is a little bit bad. So what they would do is basically like this, like this, like this, like this. And then they would try to gaslight people that, oh, Admiralty MRT needs a faster link to like this area, so they would make the new 904 or whatever it's called to loop like this. And basically what this means is that if you are along Woodlands Drive 62 or 73, they would basically, this area, they would cut off this area's connectivity to Admiralty MRT completely in the name of bus network integration. And when you disagree with them, they would be like, okay, I'm gonna compromise. I'm not gonna make 951E actually go inside Woodlands Crescent. I'm actually gonna make it go along Woodlands Avenue 7 and Woodlands Avenue 6. And then they would be like, I would shift the bus stops along Woodlands Avenue 6 and Woodlands Avenue 7 closer to Admiralty MRT. I do not care about how much right turn filter is needed for the bus to turn from Woodlands Avenue 7 or Woodlands Avenue 6, which would affect the placement of the bus stops. No, they don't care about anything like this. They would go through great lengths just to achieve whatever nonsense bus priority, that whatever vision in their head that they have in mind when it comes to like bus priority in general. Poor understanding of like road infrastructure in the first place. All these bus types that are currently present in Singapore, they are distinct. This is what the radical bus enthusiasts, they do not get it. Okay, Express also includes like CDS as well. And basically like they don't even understand like the different purpose that each buses within these categories serve. So they would end up saying, oh, I want my CDS to eat up a trunk. I want my CDS to eat up a feeder. I want my new skip stop bus service to eat up a trunk. I want my new skip stop bus service to eat up a feeder. I want my trunk service to eat up a feeder service. I want a feeder service. I want different feeder services to eat each other up, eat one another up. It also involves like really, really ridiculous suggestions such as extending 92 to Beauty World ITH, like beyond Mount Sinai area, even though realistically, when you look at the road configuration, it's next to impossible. And they would also extend the other end of 92 beyond Normanton Park just to eat up a feeder service that is completely unrelated and basically transferring the problems of congestion at the expressway to a feeder service. So if you guys, SBS transit staff, SMRT staff, LTA staff, LTA bus planning league staff, LTA bus infrastructure team staff, LTA bus asset staff, or if you're from MOT, basically if you're from LTA, MOT, PTC, Public Transport Council, or whoever, if you happen to be watching this video and you watch to the end, my message for you all is do not hire these people. Do not listen to their suggestions. If not, Singapore's bus network and industry would be destroyed.